If your startup has defensibility, it means that if you win in your market, competition will not be able to replace you later, even if they are willing to throw a lot of money into the fight. I covered defensibility in great depth in the second course of this specialization. Defensibility is a crucial requirement for a VC to invest. If you can't think of strong reasons why competition will not be able to replace you even after you have scaled up, you will not be able to raise VC investment. This is why defensibility is one of the 7 features of our framework VC Loves Game, which tells you what your startup needs to be able to raise venture capital. We discussed this framework in the second course. Coming to the defensibility of SaaS businesses, SaaS is a highly defensible business model for 6 reasons. I call these reasons the 6 dimensions of defensibility of SaaS. Can you think of some of the reasons why SaaS businesses may be defensible? You may want to pause the video here and think of a few reasons before moving forward. The first dimension of defensibility for SaaS is switching cost. Usually this is the first reason that students point out in my MBA class as well. If you have a SaaS product that a business has adopted successfully, then depending on your exact use case, it may be that the business would have stored a lot of its data and its history in your software. Such software is called a system of record. For example, if you have a SaaS for ERP or enterprise resource planning, then the business would have stored its financial and accounting data in your software. If you have an HRMS SaaS, the business would have stored its HR records and employee data. And if you have a CRM SaaS, customer records would be stored in your software along with customer history. Who bought what was communicated to whom and when, who spoke to the customer last, who got which discount codes, and much more. Now, if your software has been successfully adopted by the business, it is extremely difficult for the business to switch to a new software vendor because migrating all this data faithfully is incredibly hard. Also, a switch would result in retraining for the employees using the software, which further increases the switching cost. So, if your SaaS has succeeded in your market, even if a competitor emerges later and offers much cheaper software to your customers will find it very hard to switch. High switching cost is also the reason why software systems have extremely long lives. For example, many large businesses use their ERP system for decades without change. If a business adopts an ERP system, they may keep paying for it for 10, 20, 30 years, even if the system doesn't receive a single upgrade. The next dimension is integration. Most businesses need to use many different software tools to manage all their operations. So, if a business buys a new SaaS tool from your startup, they will usually need to integrate it with their existing software. Perhaps with other systems of record so data can flow into your SaaS. Perhaps with single sign-on software so employees can log in with their current IDs. Perhaps with communication systems so notifications can be managed better. There are many possibilities. All such integrations are done through APIs, which are endpoints and protocols for software to talk to other software. And these APIs for the integrations will either be internal APIs for software managed by the customer's IT team, or if the customer is using other third-party software, then that would have its own APIs. In either case, API integration needs non-trivial effort for a business to get right. So, once a business has adopted a SaaS and completed a few API integrations with other systems, migrating out to a new software vendor later becomes extremely difficult. Slack and Asana are 2 examples of SaaS startups that have very strong defensibility due to integrations. Most customers of Slack and Asana integrate them with multiple other software systems. Slack supports more than 2,400 integrations for customers to choose from. Each additional integration that a customer chooses makes Slack a better experience for the customer, but that also makes it equally harder to replace later. Next, look at Asana. It is a team collaboration and project management software. And once again, it has hundreds of possible integrations that a business can choose from. Now imagine how hard it is to switch out of software like Slack and Asana into another software vendor. You will need to migrate your data, your employees will need to be retrained, and you will have to redo all API integrations with your other systems. Such SaaS can be so hard to replace that there are SaaS companies out there that witness a customer leaving only if the customer itself goes out of business. The next 4 dimensions are different kinds of network effects that a SaaS product may or may not have. I covered network effects in great depth in the previous course on the VC business model. There I defined the idea of a network effect with 3 perspectives: the benefit perspective, the flywheel perspective, and the displacement perspective. In the benefit perspective, if a product has a network effect, then it becomes more valuable for all its users as more and more users start using the product. In the flywheel perspective, a product has a network effect if it is in a flywheel situation, where as the number of people using the product increase, something causes the product to start appealing even more to new users. In the displacement perspective, if a product has a network effect, then to displace any one user of the product, you must displace many users together. The first kind of network effect that a SaaS could have is the expertise network effect, which is easy to understand with the flywheel perspective. If a software X is sophisticated enough to require expertise and have power users, these power users are likely to list their expertise in X on their resumes and to treat their expertise as a marketable skill in the job market. Then, as the number of such power users grows, other companies find it easier to hire and replace people who can effectively operate X. So they start to prefer X over other software. This job demand for expertise in X leads new learners to specialize in X, which increases the supply of its power users and completes the flywheel. For example, think of how graphic designers mention their skill at Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator in their resumes. Then, companies prefer Photoshop and Illustrator because power users with the skills are more easily available. Finally, this attracts new learners to specialize in Photoshop or Illustrator, which increases the supply of power users in the job market. Another benefit of having power users is that when your power users switch jobs, they get their new place of work to adopt your SaaS as well. Due to all these reasons, SaaS companies offer certification programs like the Adobe Certified Professional Program to formally recognize the skill level of their users and kickstart the expertise network effect. Sometimes this flywheel can propagate so far that the software can become a part of a community's very identity and become a community standard or industry standard. When this happens, the community starts expecting you to be an expert in the software to call yourself a community member. For example, Tally has become the de facto community standard for chartered accountants in India. Today, it is inconceivable for a chartered accountant not to be an expert in Tally. Another aspect of the expertise network effect is early adopter lock-in. Most communities have a few members who are respected in the community as early adopters or as general experts in technology whom everyone else follows. And if a SaaS startup can lock in all the early adopters in a community, it will make it very hard for later entrants to enter the market, because the majority will not want to take a risk on a late entrant without an early adopter recommendation. The expertise network effect is very common in SaaS. Almost all sophisticated software benefits from the expertise network effect when power users begin displaying their expertise on their resumes. Thanks to James Carrier and NFX VC for articulating their thoughts on the expertise network effect on their blog, which has influenced my thinking on the topic. The second possible network effect is the cross-community network effect. If a software is used for common work by two interacting communities, both can become logged in a dynamic where displacing any one user of the first community is not possible without displacing many users of the other community. This is the case with Tally, where accountants as well as auditors depend on the software. So, displacing an accountant is possible only if the corresponding auditor is also displaced. But displacing the auditor is possible only if all the other accountants that interface with the auditor also agree to be independently displaced, which makes Tally difficult to displace anywhere. We discussed this case in more detail in the previous course. The cross-community network effect is quite similar to the two-sided network effect that marketplaces have. I will cover marketplaces in the next course. The third possible network effect is the data network effect. This is a very rare network effect that very few companies will truly have. The effect is best understood with the flywheel perspective. If your software is such that its performance keeps increasing as it collects more and more usage data, then the more people use your software, the more data they will contribute. And the more data they contribute, the better your software will become. This will attract more users who will contribute more data, and so on. Software performance in this case can mean anything that the user deeply cares about. Better performance could mean better prediction, better recommendation, faster response time, etc. The simplest non-SaaS example is Google search. The more people search, the more data they provide on what users are looking for, which allows Google to constantly improve the results it provides. One important caveat: the performance of most products improves with time as product teams solicit user feedback, run analyses, and iterate the product. But this manual performance gain is not what the data network effect represents. The data network effect requires automation of the learning needed to improve the product's performance. The product should be such that its performance is dependent on users' data directly, so that performance improves as soon as more data becomes available. Within SaaS, many kinds of fraud prevention systems provide a good example of the data network effect. Look at Riskified, for example. It is a SaaS for e-commerce retailers to reduce fraudulent transactions. One of their core offerings is chargeback guarantee, which flags potential transactions when they suspect that the transaction is not genuine and will result in a credit card chargeback later. Riskified makes a decision based on the immense database of transactions that it has collected over a decade of working with retailers. And every time a new customer starts using Riskified, their data is added to this database, which improves Riskified's performance for all existing customers. This is how the data network effect works. GoQuick is another example. It is again a SaaS for e-commerce retailers to reduce instances of an order being returned after a failed delivery attempt. They have built a database of valid and invalid home addresses in their work with several retailers, and they use this database to flag if a shipping address is probably incorrect. Again, every time a new retailer starts using GoQuick, more addresses are added to GoQuick's database, which improves GoQuick's performance for all existing customers. The fourth kind of network effects possible in a SaaS are secondary network effects. These do not result from the primary use of the SaaS itself, but because of secondary features built on top of the SaaS, like social networking or marketplace features. When the secondary feature is social networking, the strategy is often called come for the tool, stay for the network. Instagram is an example. The primary tool was a photo filter software with the secondary feature of being able to share the resulting photo with your followers. And photo sharing had the obvious two-sided network effect between creators and their audience that all social networks have. Over time, photo sharing has become so important that new users do not even know about the filters available in the app. Another such example is GitHub, which began as a SaaS tool to manage software repositories with a secondary feature of being able to showcase your open source contributions. This showcase feature has turned into a full-blown professional network for software developers. Bloomberg is also somewhat of an example. It began its life as a software tool for traders to research financial instruments with chat as a secondary feature. And chat has obvious network effects where all users benefit when another user joins the network, and it becomes possible for anyone to chat with them. Today, there are trading communities that use Bloomberg primarily for chat and rarely for research. The secondary feature could also be a marketplace that is built on top of the SaaS. Such marketplaces are called SaaS-enabled marketplaces, and they have a two-sided network effect common to all marketplaces. One example is OpenTable, which is a SaaS product for restaurants with a secondary restaurant discovery marketplace built on top that helps users discover restaurants and make reservations. Book My Show in India is another example. It began its life as a software tool for movie theaters to manage their ticket inventory. Later, they added a feature for consumers to buy movie tickets online, which benefited from the ticket inventory visibility that Book My Show had already built through its SaaS. Another similar example from India is Redbus, which began its life as an ERP system for bus operators called BOSS. This ERP system helped bus operators manage the inventory of seats for their buses. Later, Redbus added a feature to sell bus tickets online that plugged into the bus seat inventory that their customers were already managing through BOSS. One final observation on the defensibility of SaaS. Most SaaS either does not have network effects, or even if network effects are possible, they haven't taken hold due to a variety of causes. In such a case, the only reasons for defensibility are switching costs and integrations. Therefore, such a SaaS can defend itself from competition after a customer adopts it, but it also does not have a flywheel that can propel it to capture a huge swathe of the market. So such a SaaS is not in a winner-takes-most dynamic. However, if any of the network effects become important for a SaaS, it will find itself in a winner-take-most dynamic and must strive to become the market leader. Because in a winner-takes-most dynamic, only the market leaders survive. But remember that VCs love winner-takes-most dynamics, because such dynamics create those rare outsized return opportunities where a single successful bet can make the VC fund successful all by itself. This concludes our discussion on the defensibility of SaaS. Next, let's discuss why SaaS has incredibly high gross margins. Hey there, I'm KJ Saxena, founder of Relentless VC. The video you just watched is part of the Venture Capital and Entrepreneurship Specialization, which is available absolutely for free on relentless.ventures. Go check it out. If you're a tech startup founder and want to raise money from us, you should apply on our website. Lastly, if you like this video, do subscribe and share it with your friends.